Good morning. Welcome to TASCTV. This is a TASC Roots program where we reach out to the Turkish American heritage community, civil society leaders, as well as people involved in civil society and Turkey and Turkish Americans. Today we have a great program. We're going to have a nice discussion about the legacy of Ahmet Ertegun, the founder of Atlantic Records, the son of the Turkish ambassador in the early part of the 20th century, early 1900s. And our guest today is Tony Gallucci. He is the founder and the CEO of Ahmet's House. Welcome, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you, my friend. It's a pleasure to see you again, if only virtually. It's wonderful to see your smiling face.
Yeah,
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being with us. I just wanted to tell the people a little bit about you, Tony. You have a great background, and you're a very humble man, and you're doing great work. Ahmet's House is a non-profit organization and is dedicated to honoring the life story of Atlantic Records founder Ahmet Ertegun. From jazz greats as Miles Davis and John Coltrane to R&B legends Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin, and to rock stars like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, one of my favorite bands, Led Zeppelin. And Ahmet launched and shaped careers and brought musical genres across racial divides for 6 decades, and that was very courageous. He was actually empowering African American community, Black American community through his way, and that was through music and jazz. Ahmet, a Turkish immigrant and a son of a diplomat, fell in love with American jazz at a young age with his elder brother and co-founded Atlantic Records in 1947. His life and career were defined by imagination, tolerance, and a singular ability for embracing cultural roots and diversity. And I'd like to add that he took tolerance to another level. He took it to the level of acceptance. And we'll get more into that too. Tolerance is like, I can tolerate you. But acceptance is, I accept your diversity. I love you. I respect you. And together we are one. In solidarity and diversity, which is something TASC stands for as well, my organization. That I co-chair with my good friend and brother Halil Mutlu. His life and career defined a man of limitless energy, indeed, and style, and loved by hundreds of artists such as Ray Charles, who said Ahmet was the cat who had a feeling for the music. So, since 2007, Ahmet's House's founder and CEO Tony Gallucci has turned his passion for his great life and catalog of music into a mission to ensure Ahmet Ertegun's continued relevance among the world's cultural giants, excellence, elegance, permanence, Ahmet's House. And so we are together, Tony. We're going to talk about this. First of all, let's talk about the legacy of Ahmet Ertegun. Tell us about it. I mean, you're doing some great work here, and there's not too many people out here getting the good message out and get the history out. And tell us how you got interested in Ahmet Ertegun. Why Ahmet's House and the legacy?
It is a wonderful history. It is a wonderful legacy. And my own personal story started all the way back when I was a teenager. And I opened up the trifold cover of one of my favorite albums, the first album from Crosby, Stills, and Nash, put out on Atlantic Records. And inside, in the days prior to the internet where you could just Google or Wikipedia anything and learn, was this simple line in the liner notes: spiritual guidance, Ahmet Ertegun. Who is Ahmet Ertegun? A Swami? A mystic? Who is this man appearing on the liner notes with these young, beautiful faces on their debut album? And so I began a journey from that time, 1969, to learn all that I could about who Ahmet was. And of course, it took many years, and then the creation of the internet brought all of the knowledge in front of us, to the point where I could then learn, I had already learned, of course, that Ahmet was the founder of Atlantic Records, and there were books about him. And that began the connection of my personal journey with why is all the great music that I love on this one independent American record label. A realization that I came to learn many years later by talking to one of the folks at Atlantic Records was the same revelation that the young British blues lover Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin had, going through those imports, which were very difficult to get in the UK at those times when Robert was a young man. Found that, as I had found, all of his favorite music was on this one little independent American label. How could that be? And how it is that Ahmet was, as you said, not just tolerant, but embraced cultures, legacies. I have been told by those who know, including the wonderful Mrs. Ertegun, that Ahmet could sit on the curbside and talk with the bum in the gutter, and he could talk to a king or an emperor in 5 minutes later. He was that person that could reach you where you were. And in a world where many artists are very protective of their music, that they let Ahmet in. You see wonderful pictures like Ahmet sitting on the floor with Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce of Cream. And he's sitting on the floor as someone that is part of that group, and they are listening to and respecting where he comes from because of his genius, because of his ear, and because of his humility. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that Ahmet, as flashy and as beautiful as his life was also a man of great humility and a great respect for the different cultures and the races that were, whose music was being overlooked and was looked down upon. Many years later, we find Ahmet entering into partnership with the great Jerry Wexler, a man who worked at Billboard magazine as a music critic reviewer. And Mr. Wexler, Jewish-born, disliked the phrase that was used at the time, which was called race records. Jerry thought race records was a very undefined, undignified way to refer to the music of people of colors. So Jerry invented the phrase rhythm and blues. So when you talk about Ahmet and you talk about Jerry and you talk about Nestor Ertegun, you talk about Arif Mardin, you talk about the great engineer Tom Dowd, you're talking about people who arrived together at this incredibly important moment in time when people of color were still not allowed to play with white musicians, and certainly never get together in an integrated setting to enjoy the music and to dance together. These gentlemen came together at an amazing time in American history, which was looking for someone to lead out of that mess that had been created through segregation, and in particular in the home that they came to in Washington, D.C. with their father.
The history of the home is important, plays an important role. As the children or the young adult children of the Turkish ambassador, they're in the spotlight. They are held to very strict standards, even if those standards are very low, such as segregation. And they've come to a country where they have never experienced, fountains, bathrooms for Black Americans, fountains, bathrooms for white Americans. How white? How Black? I mean, how is this all? And why? And so, but I think with the humility and their ability to connect, as you stated, they said, my home is my home. The Turkish ambassador's residence is an official building, but it's also my home. And they invited Black American musicians for jam sessions in the historic building. Everyone should have an opportunity one day to tour that building, but it is out of this world. It is
magnificent building. It really is.
The architecture, the art, and so tell us about that experience, the jam sessions at the Turkish ambassador's residence.
So is Washington, D.C. in the mid-1940s is no venue that will allow black and white musicians to play together. And so with the grateful acknowledgement of Mehmet Ertegun, the ambassador, Ahmet and Nesui's father, they invited these musicians in to get to sit together. Now, black and white musicians had been doing that all over the country, but in a very secret, quiet way. At 4 a.m., when the nightclubs in New York or Chicago closed up, folks would sneak in the back door, and they would get to have jams with the great Louis Armstrong and people of that nature. To welcome people into your home, where you will share the art, where you will share food and drink together, where you will share laughter and conversation, is a very rebellious act in a segregated country, in a segregated Washington, D.C. But the brothers knew that it was the right thing to do, and fortunately their father knew that it was also the right thing to do. And so the music grew from that. And then relatively shortly after, at the Jewish Center in Washington, D.C., Ahmet and Nesui approached them, and they agreed to hold the first integrated, what we believe to be the first integrated concerts, not just in the D.C. area, but in the United States, where folks that knew the music of the black musician and knew the music of the white musician could finally sit down together, not caring what colors the skin of the person next to you are, and could enjoy then this amazing celebration of jazz together. And then the National Press Club, somewhat reluctantly apparently, signed on and gave them yet another venue in which to hold concerts. And, as I've often said, when people sit with each other, or they, even better, dance with each other, they begin to have conversations. And when they have conversations, they recognize that they're really not that different from each other. They may look different. Maybe they eat different foods. Maybe they live in different places. But ultimately, their quest is the same: to live a rewarding life, to raise a family, to live in safety and in peace, to live under the protection of the laws, and to be able to share in all the benefits of being an American citizen. And these young men, who were not at that point American citizens, although Ahmet did become an American citizen later in life, these young men, as many times we have to look to the younger people in our society to take that step out and do the thing that is right and do the thing that is very risky. But yet, that instinct, again, in Ahmet and Nesui's heart and mind, knew that it was the right thing to do. And what a beautiful thing that they gave us.
Well, it came with risks and also humiliation, attempts to humiliate, but they stuck to their principles. I know that we've read the U.S. Senate demanded that the Turkish embassy obey segregation laws, and they should not, in the wealthy area of DuPont Circle and Massachusetts Avenue, permit Black Americans into the neighborhood, let alone the Turkish embassy residence. And the State Department tried to achieve a compromise, which was even worse, by saying, the compromise is this: don't let them in through the front door, but you can sneak them in through the back door. And who's them? We're talking about Black Americans. We're talking about U.S. citizens. Again, the whole setup is confusing. It's horrible, and it's not making any sense. They're saying we're not going to do this. So the response of the Turkish ambassador, this time on behalf of his sons, were, look, if there are any senators who want to come through the back door, they're welcome to. But in Turkish culture, everyone is welcome through the front door. equally.
Exactly, and that's where their friends came, because these were regarded as friends.
Right.
Again, a very risky statement.
It is. It's like in your face. And then, of course, what subsequently happened was Ahmet Ertegun was arrested and then released. It was like, oh yeah, well, let me show you what I can do. And then, but there was just no way to suppress freedom and the truth. So, despite these condemnations from the U.S. government that they should obey segregation, despite the arrest, they continued. Where does the courage come from? The humility is beautiful. And it's such a way from heart to reach into the heart. Well, where's the courage come from?
Well, that's a great question. Where does the courage come from throughout all of history for certain men and women to step up out of a crowd and say, me, count me. I'm standing up. I want to be counted. I will not be silenced. Many amazingly courageous figures. It's something about the way that you're born. It's something about the way that you are raised, where you live. But then sometimes people, I think just genetically, who knows, there's a jump. Something happens. Together with the personality is the time. And music is that unifying event. If this were a religious experience, if this were a political expression, it would be a very different thing, because those divisions, unfortunately, exist so strongly. We can't proceed with helping Americans in this desperate, terrible time between the House and the Senate across the aisle. The idea of helping people through an epidemic, a pandemic, should never be politicized, and we've seen it. So issues of treating people of a different race properly should never have been politicized. But the music cut through it, because whatever you thought, whether it were musicians, white musicians such as Benny Goodman, who brought some black musician on that stage with him one day, and the audience loved it. And there was a gentleman that said to him, what do you have that, and he used the N-word, I won't say it, it's too disrespectful, but, why are you playing with that guy up there? And he very rightly said, if I ever hear you saying that word again, I'm going to beat your head in with my clarinet. Now, where did that come from? Well, it came from elsewhere. And it came from, I believe, from sitting down and playing with those people. The international music, the language of music, immediately pushed away those boundaries, immediately pushed away how different we are. This love of this passionate life of Ahmet Ertegun brought us together. We sat as old friends the very first day that we met at the Cosmo Club in D.C. We didn't sit down as people from different sides, people from different places, people who spoke a little differently. We sat down as friends, and it was a joy, and it continues to be a joy to work with my Turkish friends, to have been able to be invited into the embassy with the blessing of the former ambassador, our good friend Namik Tan, who I know is a good friend of yours as well.
That's was an
amazing experience. First of all, there's the place, and there are musicians in there that have been invited in. I remember at one point saying to one of the musicians that played during one of those many, many nights of jazz concerts, not a bad gig, huh?
Yeah.
A pretty nice gig.
Look, the jazz gig at the Turkish residence during Black History Month is a icon in modern Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It is a very important statement. Mm-hmm. So that night, the best musicians from around the country, from all races, ethnicities, religions are there, and jazz lovers of Washington, D.C., from Capitol Hill to people who own venues are there. We're having great food, and we're having great music, and it is, as the minutes turn into hours and you don't even feel it, you're really connecting with people, and you can see that spirit come through, the spirit of Ertegun. So similarly, Tony, when we met at the Cosmos Club, Washington Cosmos Club, to discuss what can we do to bring life to the legacy of Ertegun, you and I were brought together, and it's a ripple effect. I mean, Ahmet Ertegun probably never knew that would happen, but he brought together so many people, you know, and so here we are now, again, face to face, but this time virtually.
Yeah. And Ahmet was known to have said in the latter days of his life, no one's going to forget the Rolling Stones. No one's going to forget who Led Zeppelin is. Me, they're not going to remember the name of Ahmet Ertegun. It's going to fade away. They're not going to remember me. And that, when I read those words, and this was now many years in, as you mentioned, I've been pursuing this for 15 years professionally in a radio station, as well as then chasing this larger thing we'll talk about hopefully later. When I read those words, I thought, well, what a shame, because we all want to be remembered. We are all going to come and walk the earth and leave. We're all going to be gone someday. And what do we want to be remembered for? Why do we want to be remembered? And I think that Ahmet and others that knew him and worked with him well, that I've had the blessing to speak with over the years, have all agreed that Ahmet would love this. Ahmet would love that there's a possibility that his name might live on, not just in Turkey, but that it might live on in this country and worldwide. Because remember, you know, this is a great Turkish success story. It's an American success story. It's an immigrant success story. Now, Ahmet wasn't your typical immigrant, but at the age of 24, his father has passed, and all of those wonderful perks of being the ambassador's son are going to dissolve. And Nesuhi says to Ahmet, well, you know, what are you going to do? You'll probably go back to Turkey. You'll probably go into military service. Maybe you'll go into the diplomatic field. But sooner or later, you're going to have to get a real job. And Ahmet says, well, you know what I want, Nesuhi? I want to start this record label. Nesuhi encourages him because it probably won't take off. Thousands of people have started such aspirational ideas, and it never came to anything, or it began, but it fell apart. But do it. Go to New York and do it. Sell the 10,078 records that we have. Get the $10,000 from the family dentist and start your record company. Who knows what will happen? So here, and you know, I find this parallel is amazing to me. You know, most of the music that we love, even in our later years, is music that was generally created by very young men and women. Women in their teens sometimes, in their early 20s. Here's a 24-year-old who has been raised in a very well cared for manner, on a very high social level. A man who doesn't know what you do with your shirts when they get dirty, because he used to put them outside and someone took them away and they brought clean shirts. So he moves to New York and he rents a space in a hotel, which is too expensive. And he has to learn that, oh, you mean I don't just buy another shirt? I got to wash the shirt. Okay. But here's a 24-year-old who has come from that life now into this life. But he is spot on, accurate in his assessment and understanding of the music that's in his heart, and that is only really found in the black neighborhoods of Washington, D.C., and then other cities as well. It is an exceptional thing that he is able to bring that out. And before there were crossovers, before white people were playing black people's music and pretending it was their own, that's another story. He took the music of those people of color and put it right in the front of the American music culture, which is just 7 or 8 years away from rock and roll. Timing is everything, is it not?
I think also recognizing timing is high IQ.
well, and that's the thing that who maybe even recognize their times, and those who are ahead of their time and know what to do. Ahmet knew what to do. When the light went on him, he knew what to do. He knew how to make it. And musicians in those early days that were never approached by white people. I mean, two white guys coming into a black club were looked at as, ugh, what is this? IRS? FBI? What do they want? And Ahmet and Jerry would come into these clubs where they're the only light-skinned people, even though Ahmet was a tannish sort of a white guy. But very quickly, those musicians recognized, just like Ray Charles said, oh, here's the cat. No. Who is it? Oh, it's Ahmet. Oh, Ahmet in. Let Ahmet come in. He's okay. He's a cat.
So I see Ahmet Ertegun chasing the American dream at so many levels. Yeah. But I'm wondering, are we chasing the American dream, or is it people like Ahmet Ertegun who define what we then call the American dream? You know, he's like saying, I don't know, I'm going to be poor for a long time, but I really want to have a record company. Mm-hmm. Or I know I'm going to get arrested, but I cannot pay respect to this horrible system of segregation. Because that's not law. It's not right. It's an aberration of the mind, an aberration of the law, and it will not sustain. So basically, we see him, as many other people like him, who have made American history, and we said, hey, they chased the American dream. But I think what we really want to say is the American dream has become defined by brave, smart, kind, compassionate, hardworking people, and they are role models to us. I want to talk about your project, the Ahmet House. That's what is really exciting. Tell us, what do you envision and how is it coming along?
So for many of my last 15 years, Ahmet's House was a virtual tribute done through my radio station and the website ahmetshouse.org. And the day came when I thought, well, but really, shouldn't we have more? What if we could create an actual brick-and-mortar building to begin with in New York City, Ahmet's adopted hometown, to celebrate the life of Ahmet, celebrate the life of Jerry Wexler and all these other wonderful people, the incomparable Arif Mardin, who was the producer and arranger for Norah Jones' incredible breakthrough success, his own brother Nesui, who was the jazz lover, who virtually brought the long-playing record into the American market. And these are very, very huge things. And should there not be a place? And then I found, through discussions with lots of folks, and my life has been blessed by the number of people I've gotten to meet to talk about Ahmet, rock stars and businessmen and billionaires. The connecting thing is that if we could display in some way this legacy, this story, how is this done? How is it possible? I then find out that there is no freestanding music museum in the entire city of New York. Wow. There are pieces of buildings that are dedicated to those who worked with the art, but that there is no singular building in the city of New York to celebrate the greatest American music label and the greatest record man of all time seemed to me an absolute disgrace. And then with it goes the lives of those many, many, many people who never achieved the stardom of the Led Zeppelins or the Rolling Stones. Those people won't be forgotten. But so many of the musicians that Ahmet and Nesui grew up listening to, those names have been forgotten. How many people remember Big Joe Turner, one of Atlantic Records' first breakthrough artists? A black man who really I consider to be the gateway to rock and roll. And he sang the songs the right way. the tough way. He used the slang and he used the sayings of his people that had to be toned down when the white people took things like shake, rattle, and roll. Well, Big Joe shook, rattled, and rolled, all right. Should these lies be forgotten? And I think the answer clearly is no. So what do? We create a quote-unquote music museum. Now, I've never found a better word than museum, but museum is where they put dinosaurs up on 72nd Street in Central Park West. This is a life that was lived to the fullest, the life of Ahmet Ertegun, from his diplomatic father and his start, all the way through being at the Beacon Theater for Bill Clinton's birthday party with the Rolling Stones, and Ahmet goes to the bathroom, slips. As a proud man, he's got poor vision, he has a bad leg, but he's proud, and he slips and falls and hits his head, and one thing leads to another, and then eventually it leads to his passing. A series of complicated medical issues that put him on that path. But as Neil Young said at a ceremony honoring Ahmet's life at Jazz at Lincoln Center, Ahmet, what a way to go. Ahmet went to a concert, and the encore was heaven. Should we not continue to keep this life in front of people? I guarantee you, and I've spoken to literally thousands of people who say they do not know the name of Ahmet Ertegun, and I say, okay, but in 3 minutes, you're going to tell me everything that says you know who Ahmet Ertegun is. You ever hear of Exile on Main Street, the Rolling Stones out? Well, sure. How about Led Zeppelin? How about Crosby, Stills, and Nash? Ever hear of Eric Clapton? How about Aretha Franklin? How about Ray Charles? Everybody knows those people. And when they learn that the connecting fact between all those people is this young Turkish-born immigrant named Ahmet Ertegun, they then realize, like me, they know Ahmet. And they have been listening to and been influenced by the music of Ahmet Ertegun all their lives. And young people inspired by that story, just like Ahmet was and Neshawi were inspired in their young years to stand up, to be counted, to do the right thing. I think that this story presented in a brick and mortar space, honoring the people on both sides of the microphone, is an essential thing. And it's essential to bring out that bravery. You talked about that courage. There are many who hide a courage inside of them. And I want to build a place that people leave and are changed. A good friend of mine had a daughter who was in South Africa studying for a while, a black woman. And her mom went to the Apartheid Museum when going to visit and pick her up. And when she was there, she left and she said to herself, I can't wait to go back home and tell Tony about this place, because now I know what he wants to do. Because even though the issues are totally different, she left that museum being changed. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's it. That's it, Angela, my friend. I want to create a place that changes people. I don't want to dump people out on Fifth Avenue and have them say, well, let's go get a hamburger. Wasn't that nice? I want them to recognize that their own racism, or even just their own hidden thoughts of being slightly better than others are indeed foolish. And that this Turkish-born man helped me to see that. Because how can I hate these people of color when I'm dancing to their music all day long? You realize you can't do that. And the legacy of Ahmet Ertegun and Nestori and all these other amazing people is to prove to us that we are all a lot more alike. And these lives need to be continually celebrated. We cannot lose the history of these lives. And I'm going on a bit, but I'm so passionate about it, and I think that that's what connected you and I in immediacy.
Well, we envision a historic building, a reconstruction of a building. What neighborhood would you recommend in New York City
So if we're talking New York City, I want it to be not a destination, something that's buried somewhere that people say, oh, they look it up in a catalog and they say, oh, that looks interesting. Let me find out where it is. I want it to be in a high traffic midtown location that people will go to by choice and will also pass by. And by the displays in the windows, by the look of it, they say, wait a minute, I want to go in here. I know what this is about. Now, I don't know who that guy is, but I know who those people are. I know who those artists are. If this has something to do with that guy named Ahmet, I want to go in there. I want to learn. I want that to be an educational experience. I want it to be an entertainment experience. And I want it to be an experience that uplifts people to believe in their own personal dreams as well.
Definitely. Well, I think school curriculum on ethnic studies, school curriculum on diversity, civil rights, and Black History Month, and a state's interest in creating harmony in diversity. There's proper funding for this, I would say, not only in the private sector, but at the state level and federal programs as well. I know, like in the state of Maryland, where I reside, we have substantial funding for diversity. Certain groups take advantage of those laws and those grants better than others, but they're available and we're all learning. The Turkish American community is just learning about those opportunities that the state offers to enrich its diversity. So how do we bring people to the museum is what we're discussing. Once the museum is there, sometimes I'm working in Washington, D.C., I said, I never knew there was a museum for this on this corner, and so I want to be drawn to it. Again, education, school programs are important, state taking ownership of it, and I don't mean financial ownership, but the ownership of the experience.
Right. Exactly. I had the chance a good number of years ago. I was able to at one of the jazz concerts. Actually, I met with Mr. Kent Muhtar, the former CEO of Coca-Cola, and although we did not discuss this, through that connection, I met with some wonderful people in the Fifth Avenue offices, if they're even there any longer, and about this educational aspect. And they were very interested, but I was, a bit putting the cart before the horse. I was talking to anybody who would talk to me at all about Ahmet and Ahmet's house. But they also recognized that, well, if you can create this, if you can open this, there are businesses such as theirs that take very seriously the educational opportunities. And sadly, education in the arts in America, and I can only speak as an American about America, but educational opportunities in the arts is sadly hurt and missing funding. A place where kids can come to take lessons from masters. And I've had an opportunity to speak to some of these folks who grew up and lived and loved Ahmet, who are still with us. People like Mr. Clapton. Imagine
Eric Clapton.
12-year-olds, Eric Clapton. Imagine 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds learning guitar, getting a private lesson from Eric Clapton. Because, and I speak not with any authority to obligate Mr. Clapton anything, but I'm one of these people that believes that when people know about something good, they want to be part of it. Imagine the experience of a Clapton level genius speaking about the art, about the music, of the art of making music to a group of teenagers. How revolutionary is that in those people's lives? It's tremendous. And I think that's what Ahmet's house, at least in part, is able to do, to create those educational opportunities that city schools don't have funding for. They're struggling to stay alive. They have cut so many programs. This is a place where a nonprofit should be able to come in with the help of the private sector and the government sector to give people an opportunity to bring out that artistry. Because again, that's what connected Ahmet and Nesuhi to these great jazz musicians in their day in the 1940s. And it's something that has not gotten old. It's still a relevant need. And in a strife-filled world, music is still something that all kinds of people, colors, economics, racially, politically, demographically, all of those divisions that we have created ourselves in this planet all fade away when people share good music. As Louis Armstrong said, there's only two kinds of music, good music and bad music, and good music is what you tap your feet to.
Yeah, definitely.
And when you tap slow or fast, you tap your feet.
Yes, well said. TASCTV reaches about 1 million or more per month now. And I think and this program will be airing live as well as recorded on TASCTV, and it will be very well received. I am confident. But I was thinking, your radio program could also broadcast as well to our audience as well, to hear your talk on Ertegun, the legacy of Ertegun going forward on this project. A hero of the Erteguns was another courageous, smart, kind, compassionate person, Atatürk, which is the founder of the Turkish Republic.
Yeah.
And he was able to bring together lots of people with different diverse backgrounds for the independence of Turkey. Now, Ertegun, I believe, is affected by the quest for equality. The Turkish nation said, we don't want to be a colony. We don't need an imperial force or power telling us what to do. Our land, our families, our people, our resources, we would like that for ourselves and to share it with the community around our country. And that was resisted terribly at the cost of huge number of lives. But the Turks, without the Turk, achieved that. But the principle behind it was equality among people of the world and equality among nations. And so I was reading about Ertegun, and I found an interesting quote. Closer to the end of his life, he said, I began to discover a little bit about the situation of Black people in America and experienced immediate empathy with the victims of such senseless discrimination. Because although Turks were never slaves, they were regarded as enemies within Europe because of their Muslim beliefs. And I think here we're reflecting empathy based on his personal experience of achieving equality among peoples and nations, and applying that to Black Americans in the United States and the broader diversity of America.
And those words and that philosophy that Ahmet had, and that he, I think, even more fully came to understand even himself in his later years, hoping that at the end of it all, people would say that Ahmet Ertegun did something to raise the awareness of and appreciation of Black music. I was asked to write something on Ahmet's passing many years ago now, and on a blog of Neil Young blog, actually. And Neil was always, since the very beginning and all the way to the end, as I mentioned Neil earlier, was always one of Ahmet's great loves. And that you could rise above, that you could truly do something great, something large, something so much bigger than yourself. When you asked that question earlier, Gnai, of where this sort of thing came from, and I didn't say it then, but I'm glad you mentioned it now, that, here is here is the great his great father, first of all, and only just slightly before that, you have Ataturk, and you have all of what you just said about wanting to raise the dignity of his people who were looked down upon. And isn't society always looking down on somebody? It's sad. And so it prompted me to realize, especially in these previous 4 years when we had unfortunately, some words spoken about the Muslim people that were very unkind and very untrue. Here was a Muslim, Ahmet, who worked with a Jew, Jerry Wexler, to bring the gospel music of the blacks to white America. I can't think of any better reason to be given a Nobel Prize for peace, because isn't that peace?
That is peace.
And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And Ahmet didn't care that his business partner that he began with, Herb Abelson, who was the guy who knew the record business. Again, Ahmet had no business skill whatsoever to begin with, and probably never really cared to have any. But Herb came in as a knower of the record business. So here's a Jewish gentleman. Then Jerry comes along and creates rhythm and blues as a more distinguished way of respecting the black music. And Ahmet and Jerry go through the South. They go west. They go everywhere to find these gems of music that they knew white America would fall in love with, that kids would love. And people are still loving that. And that's what drives my mission to and to remind people always of this amazing legacy, this amazing story of a person who just, there was no plan B here. Ahmet had no plan B.
I have a question. How would you talk about the movie? Is it accurate? I watched the movie a few weeks ago again.
So which one particularly?
Ahmet Ertegun.
Okay.
It's like a remake of his life, not a documentary. It's actually a movie.
Right. I think that to me the best thing that we could do about Ahmet. So there's the story of Ahmet's life, and there's sort of the chronological discussion, which always happens in books and music and books and documentaries and movies. To me, what I have been most interested in conversations with people that knew Ahmet was not about what he did nearly as much as about who he was and what his heart was and how he connected with people great and small. To me, that's the one thing that's always missing. I'm working with a friend right now that I am encouraging to write a book with me about Ahmet, about people can learn the history and people know the story. If they know the story of Atlantic Records, they know a lot about the story of Ahmet as a businessman, as a very important businessman in the record business. A beautiful thing, no problem. But to hear of the humanity, to hear of the struggles, to hear of the boundless energy of this man who would be out at clubs until 4 a.m., show up at a board meeting at 9, wearing the same thing he was out in all night long, looking sharp and as fresh as a daisy. And 30-year-olds were sitting at that table who knew they had to go home at midnight, and Ahmet kept partying until 4. And they're sitting there thinking, I'm about ready to die right now. I can't pay attention to what's going on in this meeting. And here waltzes in Ahmet as though he's just been freshly coiffed and he put on a new pair of shoes and he's ready to go. He's ready to go again.
Roll again.
Now,
rock and
there
roll.
was something that drove Ahmet. I think there was a personal sadness in Ahmet's heart. It's not easy to be that far ahead of the people around you. There are the great authors of the past, and I don't unfortunately know the great Turkish authors. But one of my favorite authors is Charles Dickens, a man who was also filled with boundless energy, who would walk 10, 15, 20 miles at night because of all the dreams in his head. And I see Ahmet as being a person very much like that, a person who who just couldn't stop hearing the music of tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And that's an amazing talent. We all have our interests and our limitations in what we enjoy musically. For Ahmet to have lived in an era of John Coltrane and Kid Rock and embracing both of those incredibly different individuals, that takes an exceptional human being, an absolutely exceptional human being. These are the pieces of Ahmet's story that I want to see in three-dimensional life if we get to build Ahmet's house. Well, when we get to build Ahmet's house.
When we do.
When. Always when. Never if. When.
Yes, and we will, God willing, do that together. Tony, I wanted to thank you very much. It was such a beautiful program we had with you, Tony.
Thank you, my good friend, and everyone at TASCTV who's been helpful in working to make this happen. And I know there will be many more times. And I can't wait to get to finally see you again and give you a great big germ-filled hug.
Yeah, right on. I love those hugs. It's 1 year as of yesterday, I believe, that we have been having acknowledged this pandemic and have been dealing with it. Our hearts go out to all the families who lost their loved ones.
Absolutely.
And TASC has been in the fight against COVID. As you may know, Tony, we gave we fed 40,000 families in the tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and we also donated hundreds of thousands of PPE to hospitals and to frontline workers, first responders. And in Ahmet Ertegun's spirit, we reached out to the full diversity of American society. We helped in Black American community and neighborhoods, as well as Jewish American hospitals and elderly care places, as well as, of course, churches and mosques. So we continue to do the good work that is part of the American dream, that we call it now. And Tony, you are definitely their messenger and doer for good work and the work of good. We thank you again, and we look forward to having you on our program again. We look forward to having more Ertegun programs. We have some great other programs on TASCTV, such as the Embassy Row Lecture Series. I think it would be amazing to invite you there to talk about jazz sessions on Embassy Row. Jazz jamming sessions.
Yes. Well, I look forward to that, and I have enjoyed meeting with and becoming good friends with so many Turkish-born and Turkish-American folks, and it's an honor really to be welcomed into a society. You know, it's not mine. I'm Italian Irish descent, and occasionally people say, you know, you look a little bit like Ahmet, and I'm thinking, well, in my chosen line of work, that doesn't hurt.
To put some glasses on.
Yeah, I grew up. Thank you so much, my friend.
All right, my friend. Be well. Everyone, thank you very much for joining today's program with Tony Gallucci, CEO and founder of Ahmet's House, which seeks to bring life to and long live the legacy of Ahmet Ertegun. TASC cruises every Thursday at 12. We look forward to you at our next program, which will actually won't be this the 18th, because the Turkish American National Steering Committee will be having its annual representatives and board of directors meetings. But the Thursday after that, we'll be hosting the leadership of the Sephardic American community, the Sephardic Jewish American community in the Atlantic region. Beautiful. So that should be fun. Thank you again, Tony. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. ahmetshouse.org. Everybody is welcome in Ahmet's House.
ahmetshouse.org. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.